Okay, well, welcome to OHASTA's winter webinar series. OHASTA's participated in the 2018 updates to the mandatory history curriculum in Ontario to better support education for reconciliation. We support further action by members, school boards, and ministries of education to ensure that we are fully addressing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to actions, especially number 62 and 63. As an association, we are committed to building respectful relationships so that we can continue this work together. I am Sarah Murdoch. I'm a secretary with OHASTA, and I'm just coming from the Niagara region. I work for the District School Board of Niagara. So I just wanted to start our webinar in a good way with a land acknowledgement. So we begin this gathering by acknowledging the land on which I gather is a traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that the great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of the Indigenous people. Okay, as you're aware, this is an OHASTA winter webinar. OHASTA, sorry, is the Ontario History and Social Science Teachers Association. We're a volunteer organization of practicing history and social science teachers in Ontario's elementary and secondary schools. We've been serving our members since 1978, and we'd like to thank the OTF, basically, for the use of the Zoom platform to help us stay connected with our community and our members. All came here today. Today, you are going to be listening to a lovely webinar, which is Voting Rights Through Time, How Inclusive is Our Democracy? We're really looking forward today to hear from Zoe Flatman. She is an award-winning teacher with over 25 years of experience teaching civics, history, economics, and social sciences in the Toronto District School Board. She's been a curriculum writer for the Ontario Ministry of Education and is Vice President of OHASTA. Zoe is currently on a secondment with Elections Canada as the Civic Education Coordinator in the Greater Toronto Area. She has a passion for global citizenship, sustainability, and civic engagement, and she's also a lovely person. We also have with us today Rachel Collishaw. She is the president of OHASTA and an amazing president at that. And currently she is on secondment as a pedagogical advisor with Elections Canada. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Zoe and Rachel.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Sarah. You're very kind. Before we begin, and as Rachel puts up the slideshow for us, I just want to acknowledge that I am currently hosted on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat peoples. And I am grateful to be here and I want to recognize their enduring presence in these territories. Okay, Rachel, did you want to?
Yeah, hi, welcome and thanks. So I'd just also like to acknowledge the territory in which I am. So I am in Ottawa, which is on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin peoples. And I'm very grateful to be here.
All right, so thank you. So let's get started. Yes, we are here to talk about one of my favorite resources, Voting Rights Through Time. And think about how inclusive is our democracy. So to begin, we'd just like to take a little poll. So if, Sarah, if you could just pop that link, great, thank you, in the chat, just to kind of see what your learning environment is like this year. So from the responses, it looks as though about half of you are doing hybrid learning and about a third are online only, with a couple of people teaching in person only. So it looks as though the idea of a blending is probably going to be very helpful for most of the people today. So that's what we're going to focus on in our presentation, is introducing you not only to the resource itself, but also to some of the blended learning adaptations that we've made to be able to use virtually as well as face-to-face. Okay. So as you can see here, all of Elections Canada's educational resources are inquiry-based, cross-curricular, collaborative, nonpartisan, bilingual, accessible, and free. So at the end, you'll find out where you can get all of these free materials from. You can order the physical kit, as you can see in the photo here. They come with a lot of manipulatives. If you are in a face-to-face setting, they're also available for download on our website as well. So you don't have to order, but ordering, I think, is a really good thing that you'll want to do at the end. They're all high quality content. We have videos, maps, data, infographics, case studies, all kinds of things that you can use in a whole variety of ways in your classes to stimulate engagement with your students. We have also, as a result of COVID, produced blended learning guides to help you use the resources not only in the face-to-face collaborative way that we had in the past, but also virtually online, or even having students working in an environment where they're not able to work together in groups. So, you may choose to use the blended learning guide in whatever way fits your classroom. You could do the Minds On in person, you could do the activity online, and perhaps do the consolidation in person, or any blending or options that you wish. Okay. So in talking about blended learning, these are some of the key criteria that make up good blended pedagogy. And this is really what we try to focus on in drawing up these guides. So we want a seamless connection between online and in-class, virtual learning environment with increased engagement, student to student, student to teacher, increased student control over time, place, pace, and path of learning. And you'll see these in the resources as we go along, and repurposed instructional time. And this is a really good thing about using a blended learning platform, is that students can do the independent thinking at home, they can do the independent learning at home, and then when you come together as a group in a classroom, you can have a richer conversation, and that really helps with that repurposing of time. So this is the resource that we're going to be talking about today. And all of our resources, as I mentioned, are inquiry-based, and they start with an inquiry question. So the question for this resource is, how inclusive is our democracy? So three-part lesson structure. They all start with a Minds On, to connect the student's own experience to the idea that they'll be exploring in the lesson. So students, in this case, we ask students to think about what they feel and not explain a particular event. So the first part of it is that we ask them to think about a time that they felt excluded. What was that feeling, right? Not what happened, but what is that feeling? Because what we want to do here is we want to co-create criteria that we're going to use throughout the lesson. So anonymity is really important here. We want to provide that safe environment for students, whether we're in person or online. So in this case, you can see that the student is using a Post-it note, and you'll see how those Post-it notes were used in a little bit. So if I were doing it in an online environment, I might use a Google form, which would help with that anonymity. So you can see here are the Post-it notes. We start out with a time that you felt excluded, but we want to balance that conversation. So we ask students to think of a time that they were included as well, to think about what inclusion feels like. So the gentleman in this photograph is the Chief Electoral Officer of Canada, Stéphane Perreault. He did a visit here in Toronto at East York Collegiate. So he's putting his post-it note on the chart paper. So now we're going to introduce students to the idea of inclusion and voting rights in Canada. So once we move into the activity part of this lesson, again, you can see Stéphane Perreault here. You can see some of the materials that you're going to get in this kit. Each kit comes with timeline activity boards that are going to be used, context cards for each case study, as well as specific cards for each of the 4 case studies that we have. We have case studies on women, Japanese Canadians, youth, and of course our new one that you're going to get a chance to see today, our First Nations Peoples case study. We're also working on an Inuit case study that we're hoping to pilot test in the new year. So if you are interested in being a teacher to help us pilot test that particular case study, we'd love to hear from you, and you can maybe give us your information at the end of the presentation. So again, this is in East York Collegiate. You can see Stéphane working with the students there. So students read each card aloud and they place it on the timeline by date. They then discuss where it might go on the inclusion-exclusion scale. So you can see in the background of this photo, the teacher has taken those post-it notes from the Minds On and used that to create the criteria for students to think about if they're stuck on where to place one of the cards. They can think about those criteria that you've created in the Minds On part of this lesson. And in the online adaptation, what we've done is that we've created a Google form in this case so that students can think about these particular incidents in the case study without having to have the cards and share and be in close proximity. So if you can give us the link, let's give it a try. We'll take a look at the First Nations case study so you can see what students are going to be doing. So the link is in the chat. If you
I just finally got my chat back up, and I really like the suggestions for using Pear Deck or Jamboard to reproduce the sticky notes. And we have created a Google form if you want to use that as well.
I have used Jamboard for sticky notes in using one of our other activities when I visited the class recently. It does work well.
Can you guys see the responses from our Minds On?
There's some really good vocabulary in there. Alienated, there's some great vocab in there.
And you guys are pretty top notch for vocabulary. This is one of my favorite things when I do this with students, and we put the vocabulary up on the wall, and then they can see, like, you can really get an instant gauge of where their literacy levels are at. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, OHASTA conferences. Thanks. Although you didn't follow the instructions. You're not supposed to actually name the time when you felt included.
Okay, so we're getting some excellent responses to the case study. Okay. Which is what we like to see.
Oh, some diversity here.
Mm-hmm. Just give another
a lot of purple in those first ones.
Yeah.
So many interesting responses.
And that's the whole thing about these activities, is there isn't a right or wrong answer, right? That we want to have critical conversations about these things with our students. So we don't want everybody to think the same way. We want that collaborative conversation to go on. So keep working on that if you are, but also this is a really good example of that idea of repurposed time. So students can take the time to read through and do the rankings on their own and think about it, you know, really thoroughly and thoughtfully, complete the form. And then when you come back together or through even on an online discussion, that's where you can have a richer discussion where students have had some space to really think about these things ahead of time.
Yeah. So in the usual resource, like students are reading these cards out loud in a small group, which is great, and they can have a discussion about that. But sometimes, you know, group dynamics can take over, somebody can make decisions for everybody else, whereas this really gives students that like sort of individual time to really to think about it. So it works similar but different.
Right.
And the only other thing I'd like to point out is this final card. I don't know, Zoe, if you were going to talk about that, or should I?
Go ahead.
So when we were developing this resource, it was really important to, you know, the First Nations folks that we were working with, that we acknowledge that First Nations had governed themselves long before any Europeans got to this place. And so what's really interesting is that this card really functions as a way, so especially when we're looking at the timeline itself, which you will in a moment, students have a really hard time placing this card on the timeline because it doesn't necessarily go on the timeline. And it's not really about inclusion in Canada's federal system of voting. So it kind of complicates the whole notion of creating a timeline, which is kind of a Western construct. So it's a really interesting way to introduce Indigenous knowledge into your classroom. And yeah, to really sort of problematize what we're doing.
Okay, maybe we'll go back to the slideshow. If you're still working on the form, by all means, go ahead. And but we'll just kind of keep going because I'm cognizant that we have short time and I want to give you another chance to play. So you'll notice here that we have a turning point, which is really a key concept in the historical thinking concept of continuity and change. And historians make these kinds of decisions about when one era ends and another begins based on evidence. So you can ask your students, and the turning point frame comes as part of the kit, to choose one of the events in the story that they think is a turning point. And it's really interesting because, again, they're having those critical conversations in their groups. And when the activity is over and students have an opportunity to look at what other groups did, the really interesting part is that all of the timelines will look different. In other words, students will have placed cards in, in +2, -1 in different places, but also the turning points will vary quite often. So groups will put them in different places. And so you can have that conversation about, why did you choose that? What criteria are you using? So we're building in those historical thinking concepts as well. So what we have done, again, to provide you support in a virtual environment or in a distance classroom, is an online adaptation where we've created a Google Draw, and you can, or students can, move the cards around on the timeline virtually. So we'll give you a chance to try this as well. We've given instructions in the lower right-hand corner of how to read the text, because all you see here on the date is the date and a photograph. So these are the actual cards, although on the card, the text, the photograph, and the date are all on one side. If you use Control-Alt-Y, then you can see the text on the other side. So that's the time immemorial card, and it has the text on the back. And then so students can click and drag them to the spot on the timeline and then place them in terms of inclusion or exclusion. If you want to have students use that turning point frame idea, they could do a number of things. They can put a star above the card or beside the card that they choose as the turning point, etc., or some kind of call out. So they can insert their turning point. So the link is in the chat. Okay, so we're back, and you get a chance to see how you can use this. And you can resize the cards if you want to fit them in different ways. There's lots of different ways to do this. But really the key thing here is having the students go through this activity. They've already had an introduction through the Google form, and you don't have to do both sets of this activity, but I think it's really interesting. And I think that getting the students to work together in groups is really that important collaborative piece. Does anybody have any feedback or questions or comments?
I just wanted to ask then, the students would be looking for what they thought was the turning point in terms of the event that would be at +2 for including Indigenous voices. Is that right?
Not necessarily. So they choose the turning point using those criteria from, you know, the historical thinking concepts. So a point at which this case study changes direction or changes its pace, right? So they're using the historical thinking concept criteria to choose a turning point. It could be a -2. It could be a +1. It doesn't have to be, you know, a +2. So it can be any point.
So there may be several turning points depending on the question that you're asking. So if you're asking like, when did things change for the better? When did they begin to change for the better? You know, there's a lot of different arguments that can be made. Sometimes if you see events are piling up all at once, then there's like maybe something going on there. Or if something is changing in quality. It's a pretty amorphous kind of concept, but it's super interesting to discuss with any historical event because, well, in particular because of the way our curriculum is structured in Ontario by dates, right? So like, why did they pick those dates, right? Like, it's not like people woke up, you know, January 1st, 1982, and suddenly everything was different. You know, there's sort of a buildup of historical events that begins somewhere, and like, what's that tipping point? So it's an interesting question.
Yeah. The other thing I have also done with this is I have used the concept of historical significance. Choose the most significant event. So that can also be really interesting because it doesn't have to be a positive, or it could be the worst, it could be the best, it could be, you know, what is the criteria? What is significant about this particular event? So that's another way you can use that turning point frame. We want you to get creative and use them to meet the needs of your students. Okay, I noticed we're getting short on time, so let's here are some more students. So here you can see some examples of the timelines that they have created. This was taken 2 years in the fall of 2018. That's why they're working with their masks. But that's an example of one timeline. They're looking at the youth case study, I can see there.
There was just one question about, is this in the draw piece? Is it in any other format? So there's a school board that doesn't use any Google apps.
Yeah, so I think with the draw format, we don't have it in any other format. So we were just working within the Google apps because we knew we could get it A, approved, and B, out to students quickly. So we are, I think, down the road looking at like how we can put it into other formats, but that would involve a lot more people and like tech guys and that kind of stuff. So we know you can use the forms and some other applications, but if there's an application that you think would do the same thing, please reach out and let me know. I'd love to hear about it.
All right, so these students you can see are using the paper version of the thinking guide. If you were online, you could use a discussion forum and so on. This is really where I think this lesson really soars, is where we now start to take the conversation in a new direction. You know, does the right to vote always mean inclusion in democracy? So this is where we can branch out and really get students thinking critically, and it can be a launching pad to further inquiry. You could also ask students to create their own case study. So as I said, we're creating an Inuit case study, but they could create case studies of their own and you know, use this.
Yeah. And I mean, there's lots of groups that were denied the right to vote in Canada that aren't included in this resource. So there's a lot of religious groups or other groups that might be more relevant to your community.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, we have an infographic. We have it in video form and we have it in paper form. You know, just to kind of have that conversation about how voting rights changed over time. So you can ask them what percentage of the people in Canada do you think had the right to vote in 1867, and you can see it was 11%, right? Whereas as of 2019, suddenly it's 72% of the people in Canada had the right to vote. Okay? That's our kind of consolidation piece. And then we're going to ask them to reflect individually, again, using the paper thinking guide or through a Google form, or excuse me, a Google Doc. Students can now start to reflect on what they've learned about inclusion and exclusion. So we have an exit card or a personal kind of reflection at the end of every activity so that students can consolidate what they've learned and really start to sort of think about it in bigger terms. So we would like to ask you really quickly if you would let us know what are some of your takeaways. So if we can post the form in the chat again, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you for your question, Leah. So like Sarah said at the beginning, so we're going to post this webinar on our YouTube channel, the OHASTA YouTube channel, and we'll put the links to this slideshow. But all the resources, including most of the slideshow, or not the pictures so much, but a slideshow for teachers to kind of take you through the activity, is posted on our website, and Zoe's going to share that pretty soon.
Yep. All right, so all of our resources, and this is the set that we have thus far, are available free for order or download on our website, which I will give you in just a minute. We also have the blended learning adaptations posted within each activity or each resource page. We also have curriculum connections, so you can search by province, by subject area. So you could say civics if you were in Ontario, or history or something, geography, language, English. All of our resources are available in English, French, and language learner versions for your classrooms. Or you can search by the actual resource. So you can see that for civic action, then and now another one of our resources, there are 172 curriculum connections across Canada, because we haven't chosen a province or territory here. So these are available anywhere across Canada for order or download, or the blended learning versions as well. And this is our website, electionsanddemocracy.ca, where all of these resources are available. You can follow us on Twitter or Facebook. And as I mentioned, the blended learning guides there is a blended learning page on our website, but they're also embedded into each of those resource pages. So you will find the tools that you need, as well as the guide that gives you some ideas about how to use the resource in a face-to-face class, in a virtual class, and you can pick and choose from that menu of items.
Great. And Jan, and also in answer to your question, we also have a PDF brochure that we can post with the video of the webinar. So if you wanted to share the brochure. I believe it's also available to download from our website too.
And the other service that we have here in the GTA, and GTA is a little bit flexible, we have a free professional development or professional learning service. So I can come in and work one-on-one with teachers or with the department, for example, do a little PD. I also am available to come in and do a classroom demonstration. So I can come into your virtual classroom. I can come virtually, obviously not in person, and work with your students, work through the lesson with them, and you can observe and see how your students engage with the material. So if you're interested in that, please do reach out. There is a general email, education@elections.ca. Or my email, which is just my name, @elections.ca as well. So please reach out to us if you're interested in having me work with anyone in your department, in your school, in your board, or again, if you want a classroom demonstration, I am happy to come. So that's our pilot project for the GTA. So does anybody have any questions?
I'll just say that I've had Zoe in my classroom and it's a really great idea. So I was sharing that with Emily in our small group. So I'll just say it with the whole group that if you can bring Zoe to your class, it's worth the class.
Thank you very much, Jan.
And it costs you nothing.
Even better, yes.
Yeah. So does nobody have any questions?
I mean, I guess we covered everything, Zoe.
Thank you for that, Nicole. We may be able to do something in the future. Right now we have a pilot program that in the GTA, and the point is to sort of gauge how successful it is to have, or the importance of having a local person on the ground who can help teachers. So we're trying to do a bit of a pilot test and see what the impact of that local educator is. So we may or may not be able to go national, but do reach out. Just
yeah. And Nicole, if you want anything, you can certainly reach me. So my role at Elections Canada is a bit more national. So if there's things that I can assist with, just feel free to let me know, and we may be able to do something. And thanks, Kelly, for the other resources in Challenge and Change. Which resource did you use in that subject? Just curious.
So I've used the physical resources as well as the online, just when, I forget the title of the exercise, but when students decide what are the different ways that they can make a difference.
Yeah, civic action then and now. Yeah,
that's it. Yes, thank you. I have no brain left after my
fair
hybrid day.
Yes, fair enough. Yeah, that's a great one. That's a real favorite of mine as well. The digital skills for democracy is also excellent for Challenge and Change, because it's about teaching students how to decide whether information that they're receiving digitally is reliable or trustworthy or not. So it gives them strategies and skills to sort of figure out what is trustworthy in that digital environment. It's a great one. And we also have blended learning adaptations for that resource as well.
As always, you can get in touch with us at OHASA. We have a wonderful webpage. Be sure to take a look. We'll also have upcoming webinars, so stay in touch. If you haven't signed up for Rapport, which keeps us all connected, be sure to go on our website and sign up. We always share some great resources and ideas, and we're always looking for people like yourselves to send us in something they'd love to share. So please keep that in mind. And I do want to take this opportunity to thank Zoe for her time, and Rachel, as well as everybody for taking the time out of their busy schedules to attend this webinar. It's greatly appreciated. We'll stay here for a bit in case you have any questions or want to chat with Zoe after the webinar, but I am going to stop recording at this time. So thank you, everyone. And I hope you have a wonderful evening and stay well.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.